What you love is what you become. It is said that love is contagious. So love something that is of higher altitudes. When it comes to retrograde Mercury or retrograde Venus, it all depends on what you love, on what you follow, on what you are from within. Whatsoever you are from within is what you will follow. So if you are able to appreciate what I am sharing, then it simply means that you are a beautiful person. Because whatsoever I am sharing or whatsoever I have shared is beautiful. But that beauty can be known only to those who have that within them. And that is why it is necessary to understand the environment in which a certain seed grows. If a good seed falls in a bad garden, then the good seed also becomes bad. If a bad seed falls in a good garden, then even though it is bad, even though it is poor in quality, still that seed will grow into a beautiful tree. So it all depends on what the environment is. And that is why I always say that seed is secondary, the environment is primary. It always happens that a young boy, a very positive boy, a boy full of life, falls in love with a wrong woman, with a wrong girl. And that wrong girl spoils a good boy. Why? The company. Company matters. You fall in love, but if you fall in love just by the looks, just by infatuation, then you are missing the point. You are in a great danger. And that is what happens with many good boys and good men. They fall in a wrong company. They go by looks, and then those looks eventually turns out as a great suicide. So what I am saying is that always focus, always try to understand the company in which you are. A wrong company can spoil a good person. And that is why you see many good men in a troubled society. So it is necessary that the environment is positive. I have seen many mothers who give birth to a special child, and because they are good, they are able to help that special child grow, and not only just grow, but also the special child becomes a good person, a well-cultured person, not someone who will offend others by posting some negative cheap comments. So it all depends on the upbringing. And then there are mothers who have a very normal child, physically fit, but still that child is spoiled. He is completely spoiled. So who is the culprit? Not the child, but the mother. Not the seed, but the environment. And this is what is very, very significant when it comes to observation of certain planets and placements. And that is why you will be surprised to see that many great people are born with debilitated planets, and many cheap fellows are also born with exalted planets. Why? because the environment matters. If the overall quality of the horoscope is good, then a debilitated planet or a retrograde planet will also turn out to be great. And if the environment of the whole birth chart, if the quality of the whole birth chart is negative, is cheap, then even a exalted planet will not be able to provide the results that are expected from it. In this podcast, I am starting a new series, the Retrograde series, and in this podcast I will be talking on Retrograde Venus and Retrograde Mercury. Remember, I am not here to share all those things that you find in the books. I am here to share with you the real experiences called life. And so, I am simply helping you to understand the essence of retrogression. Always remember, a teacher just shows you the way. A teacher is a pointer. A teacher will show you the path. You have to walk the path. And so, through this podcast, I am trying to help you understand that a retrograde Venus or a retrograde Mercury is not bad. It all depends on the environment in which it falls. And in this podcast, I also shared a beautiful story of Swami Vivekananda. Do listen to it. It moved my heart, and who knows, it may touch the heart of you as well. So let's begin. Retrogression is beautiful, especially from a spiritual perspective. Whenever a transiting planet retrogrades, it creates a wonderful opportunity for you to sit back and introspect on the matter of the house that it rules. Always remember, it is necessary that in life you get the opportunity or you create an opportunity for yourself to pause for a while. In life, it is necessary that you pause during certain phases of life so that you can introspect and take a better view of certain matters of your life which need or has much scope for improvement. Retrogression of transiting planet and retrogression of the natal planet are two different subjects. Transiting planet retrogression signifies a short span of time during which the native gets a rare window of opportunity to sit back, pause, and introspect on the matters of that house, the house that the retrograde planets signify. However, when it comes to the natal retrograde planet, then the native is destined to have a lifelong learning lessons about the matters that the retrograde planet signifies in his or her chart. When Venus is retrograde in a person's birth chart, then such a person will have to go through many lessons of love. He may go through several breakups in relationships. He may be cheated in love affairs, or he may simply go through all kind of sexual pleasures just to later realize that what an ass he has made of himself by running behind woman and sex. So eventually, if the person is an evolved soul, then this retrograde Venus in his birth chart enables him to learn, to evolve through the many bad or strange experiences that he had during his whole life. So retrogression leads to self-learning, to self-growth, especially if the soul is an evolved soul.
When you fail, you learn something new, and this learning leads to success in the next relationship. However, if the learning is not happening, then you continue to fail in relationships. Venus is the goddess of art, all kinds of art. Love making is also an art. And so, women and men having retrograde Venus generally are talented when it comes to the art of love making. Kama Sutra. In India, one man took the courage to document the many sexual positions by practically observing the art of love making, and his name was Vatsyayan. I am of the view that Vatsyayan must have had a retrograde Venus because he was so much interested in analyzing the art of sex that he spent many years of life writing a detailed scripture on the art of love making, on the art of sex, titled Kama Sutra. However, Vatsyayan was not a common soul. He was also a spiritual person, and this is seen through his writings. The whole purpose of Vatsyayan in sharing and educating society about sex and love making was basically to bring refinement in sexuality. Because when you discuss sex openly, when you don't find anything wrong about sex, only then do you truly evolve as a much matured human being. Vatsyayan scripted the ancient Indian Sanskrit text on sexuality, eroticism, and emotional fulfillment in life. However, his personal life was highly spiritual and he was a very pious person, and this is clearly reflected in the last words that he writes in his famous sutras, the Kama Sutras, sex sermons. Vatsyayan writes, after reading and considering the works of Bharavya and other ancient authors and thinking over the meaning of the rules given by them, this treatise was composed according to the precepts of the Holy Writ for the benefit of the world by Vatsyayan while leading the life of a religious student at Banaras and wholly engaged in the contemplation of the deity. This work is not to be used merely as an instrument for satisfying our desires. A person acquainted with the true principles of this science, who preserves his dharma, virtue or religious merit, his artha, that is worldly wealth, and his kama, that is pleasure or sensual gratification, and who has regard for the customs of the people, is sure to obtain the mastery over his senses. In short, an intelligent and knowing person attending to dharma and artha and also to the kama without becoming the slave of his passions will obtain success in everything that he may do. What a great human being Vatsyayan was, and how deep are these words. I repeat the words. He says, one who has regard for the customs of the people is sure to obtain the mastery over his senses. Only a spiritual being can relate to these deep, insightful words of Vatsyayan. Men and women having retrograde Venus have a far greater understanding of sex, and only that man and only that woman who can understand his or her sex and sexuality can truly progress on the spiritual path. And nobody is going to tell you this, because not everybody is aware of the truth. And the truth is hard, always hard. And those who are aware of this may not dare to share. But I am telling you that you do not fear your sexuality, because unless you overcome your sexuality, you cannot transcend. You cannot truly become free of sexual desires. Remember, human life primarily revolves around two aspects: ego and sex. And overcoming these two aspects is the greatest challenge for a spiritual seeker. And a true spiritual seeker does not run away from ego and sex. Instead, he tries to work on them by facing them and finishing them by realizing their futility. It is often said that prostitutes are bad because day and night they do sex. Once it happened, a great king welcomed Swami Vivekananda. And this is a very old story. A story before Swami Vivekananda traveled to the US and became famous. So during those days, Swami Vivekananda was still evolving. He was very young, but the king had heard about him. And so he invited Swami Vivekananda to his court. And you know how the kings treat their guests. They treat them with beautiful dancers, beautiful prostitutes. And so when Swami Vivekananda came to his palace, the king presented the most beautiful dancers and the most beautiful prostitutes before him. The king completely forgot that to receive a sannyasi, to receive a monk with the singing of prostitutes and dancing of prostitutes doesn't suit. But he couldn't know anything else. He always knew that when you have to receive somebody, drinking and dancing have to be done. And Vivekananda was still immature. He was not a perfect sannyasi yet. He was not a perfect monk yet. He was evolving. He was young. Had he been a perfect monk, then there was indifference, no problem. But he was not indifferent yet. He could not move with prostitutes the way Jesus had moved with prostitutes. Jesus was indifferent. He has not gone that deep into Patanjali even. So he was a very young man and a very suppressive one who was suppressing his sex and everything. When he saw the prostitutes, he simply locked his room and would not come out of it. The king came and he asked his forgiveness. He said, "We don't know. We have never received any monk, any sannyasi. We always receive kings. So we know the ways. So we are sorry. But now it will be too much insulting because this is the greatest prostitute in the country and very costly. And we have paid her. And to say her to move and go will be insulting to her. And if you don't come, she will feel very much hurt. So please come out." But Vivekananda was afraid to come out. That's why he was still immature, still not a seasoned sannyasi. Still indifference is not there. A condemnation is there. A prostitute, she should be condemned. He was very angry and he said, "No." Then the prostitute started singing without him. And she sang a song of ascent. And the song is very beautiful. The song says that I know that I am not worthy of you, but you could have been a little more compassionate. I am dirt on the road, that I know, but you need not be so antagonistic to me. I am nobody, ignorant, a sinner. But you are a saint. Why are you afraid of me? It is said, Vivekananda heard from his room. The prostitute was weeping and singing, and he felt the whole situation of what he is doing. It is immature and childish. Why he is afraid? Fear exists only if you are attracted. You will be afraid of a woman if you are attracted to her. If you are not attracted, the fear disappears. What is the fear? An indifference comes without any antagonism. He opened the door. He couldn't contain himself. He was defeated by the prostitute. The prostitute became victorious. He had to come out. He came and he sat, and he wrote in his diary letter that a new revelation has been given to me by the divine. I was afraid. Must be some lust within me. That's why I was afraid. But the woman defeated me completely, and I have never seen such a pure soul. The tears were so innocent, and the singing and the dancing were so holy that I would have missed them. And sitting near her for the first time, I became aware that it is not a question who is there outside, it is a question of what is within. That night, he wrote in his diary, "Now I can even sleep with that woman in the bed, and there will be no fear." He transcended. That prostitute helped him to transcend. This is a miracle. Ramakrishna couldn't help, and a prostitute helped him. So nobody knows where the help will come from. Nobody knows what is evil and what is good. Who can decide? Mind is impotent and helpless. So don't take any attitude. That is the meaning of being indifferent. That prostitute was a woman with a pure heart. Always remember, never be quick to judge. You never know what lies beneath. Swami Vivekananda initially condemned the prostitute, but when she started singing and he heard the words of her song, his heart melted. He came running to her. He must have touched her feet. He was a man of great stature. Only a man of his stature can understand the heart of such a woman, that not only he is touched, but he also sits down and writes in his diary, "A new revelation has been given to me by the divine. I was afraid. Must be some lust within me. That's why I was afraid. But the woman defeated me completely, and I have never seen such a pure soul. The tears were so innocent, and the singing and the dancing were so holy that I would have missed them. And sitting near her, for the first time I became aware that it is not a question who is there outside. It is a question of what is." How deep is this, my fellows? How deep? But only an evolved soul can understand the depth of it. Others cannot. And I am so thankful that Swami Vivekananda mentioned about this, mentioned about a prostitute who gave him that which nobody could have given. The prostitute must have had a retrograde Venus. She may be an expert in the art of lovemaking. That's what prostitutes are known for. And in fact, a prostitute is better than the other woman, because the other woman steals your husband. A prostitute has absolutely no interest in stealing your husband. Therefore, it is said that prostitutes have helped many married couples from falling apart. Retrograde planet therefore has the ability to bring a certain mastery in the matters that it rules. However, since much energy is spent in attaining mastery, the other dimensions of life suffer or take a backseat. For example, a retrograde Venus may compel you to spend most of your years in the matters of love, relationships, and the matters that Venus rules in your birth chart. Many great artists, actors, and actresses are born with retrograde Venus. It has the ability to provide you with a unique talent that can give birth to a genius talent, to a genius work of art. When Mercury is retrograde in a person's birth chart, then such a person is always going through a lot of brainstorming, a lot of analysis, which in turn provides him with a certain revelation or invention of idea. Steve Jobs is one fine example of retrograde Mercury. However, the buck doesn't stop here. Although the retrogression of Mercury provides them the time and space to sit back, observe, and analyze, still it also gives them certain side effects such as making a wrong decision, choosing the wrong people, and getting cheated. In 1985, Steve Jobs was forced to resign from Apple. He was the founder of Apple and yet he had to leave Apple. However, in 1997, after 12 years of break, Steve Jobs returned back to Apple with the new concept that gave birth to iPhone. This is the basic trend of Mercury retrograde, that what was left unfinished needs to be finished, and for that one has to return and deliver. Since it is Mercury, the matter is more related to intellectual property. Intellectual property, IP, refers to creations of the mind, such as inventions, literary and artistic works, designs, symbols, names, and images used in commerce. By returning to Apple, Steve Jobs finished his unfinished karmic dues of delivering the greatest intellectual property to the human world, the making of the iPhone. Steve Jobs died in 2011, but in the last 14 years that he spent working for Apple, he was able to complete most of his unfinished business. The retrograde Mercury in his chart had delivered what was promised and what needed to be completed. It is said that when Steve Jobs died, the only book that he had with him was the book written by Paramahansa Yogananda, Autobiography of a Yogi. Probably during the last days of his life, he was reading this book, and who knows that this book may lead him to a new level of consciousness, a new level of rebirth in which the Mercury is no more retrograde because the work has been accomplished, the awareness has risen, the consciousness has expanded. God bless his soul. So retrograde Mercury is not bad, because it provides a window of opportunity to sit back and spend more time on a certain subject. It gives great potential to analyze deeply and find out that which others have been missing to find. However, for a retrograde Mercury to fructify positively, the whole chart needs to have a certain quality to it. In a cheap fellow's birth chart, a fellow who comments to hurt others, in such a cheap person's chart, this kind of development will prove futile. And therefore it is only when the person is an evolved soul, or when the person is an evolving soul, that this retrograde Mercury can show great results and lead one to some great inventions, discoveries, as well as great artistic talents. Madonna and Lady Gaga also have retrograde Mercury. Interestingly, those who had retrograde Mercury in their birth chart, these fellows enjoy the time when transiting Mercury goes retrograde, simply because these fellows are born with the qualities of doing deep analysis, that the transit Mercury retrograde period complements their inborn retrograde Mercury qualities. Transiting retrograde Mercury proves challenging for those who do not have retrograde Mercury in their birth charts. They are not used to pausing and analyzing. They like to analyze while moving ahead, but transiting Mercury slows down the pace of their work life and compels them to pause and look back when Mercury goes retrograde. People often relate reincarnations with retrograde, but that is a myth. Retrograde has absolutely nothing to do with reincarnation. Retrograde simply is a state of quality, a state of guna that a native is born with. Many people also associate the myth that a retrograde planet gives results of the house behind it. Meaning, if a retrograde Mercury is in the 7th house, it will give results of the 6th house. This is also a myth. Nothing sort of this happens in real life. Retrograde Mercury means a state of the brain that simply likes to pause or is compelled to pause and analyze. So when you pause and spend a lot of energy on analyzing, delays happen naturally. People say that you take a lot of time to conclude, you take a lot of time to reach to a decision. But that's how it is. To some, you may also appear as a black sheep or an odd figure. But then that is bound to happen, because in the count of 10, only 2 will have retrograde Mercury. And the minority always stands out, and so does the fellows having retrograde Mercury. However, I again repeat that the horoscope needs to have certain quality to it. Else, retrograde Mercury is like a sharp-edged sword. If it is put to use for a good purpose, it can lead to great intellectual output. However, if it is put to a bad purpose, then cheaters, frauds, and even black magicians are born with this kind of retrograde Mercury in a troubled horoscope. However, in a good quality horoscope, the result of retrograde Mercury is always good. Always remember, and I say this specifically to my close followers, that in every man and in every woman, good and evil exist. Good and devil both exist in you. Depending on your karma, you either boost the goodness within you or the devil within you. And retrograde Mercury will work based on which side you choose, the good or the devil. For example, on this forum, many people claim that they are students of astrology. But look at their comments. Their comments show what they are in the true sense. And so always remember, a single planet is not bad or good. What makes him bad or good is the environment in which the planet is placed. If a good seed is placed in a bad garden, it will turn out bad. And if a bad seed is placed in a good garden, it will turn out good. So the environment matters. The holistic quality of the birth chart is what matters. It happened once. There was a great artist. He must be like me. He was in search of a beautiful person. He wanted to paint a portrait of an innocent, beautiful person. And he searched and he searched, and finally he came across a beautiful young boy. And he looked so innocent, so candid, so energetic, and so full of life that the young artist decided to paint his portrait. Millions of copies of the portrait were made, and it sold far and wide. People felt great gratitude for just being able to hang the picture on their walls. After a gap of 20 years, when the artist had grown old, he decided to paint another portrait. This time, he wanted to paint a portrait of the worst cruel person on this planet. Because after living through many experiences of life, he realized that along with good, they will also exist in human beings. And so he started searching for a man who is not a man but a devil. Someone who would go to gambling dens, to bars, to madhouses. This subject had to be full of hell's fire. His face had to show all that is evil, ugly, and sadistic. After a long search, the artist finally met a prisoner in a jail. The man had committed 7 murders and had been sentenced to be hanged in a few days. Hell was evident in the man's eyes. They spouted hate. His face was the ugliest one could hope to find. The artist began to paint him. When he had completed the portrait, he brought out his earlier picture and set it by the side of the new painting for contrast. It was difficult to assess which was better from an artistic point of view? Both were marvelous. He stood staring at both of them, and then he heard a sob. He turned and saw the chained prisoner crying. The artist was surprised. He asked, "My friend, why are you crying? Do these pictures disturb you?" The prisoner said, "I have been trying to hide something from you all this time. But today I am lost. You obviously do not know that the first picture is also of me. Both portraits are of me. I am the same shepherd you met 20 years ago in the hills. I am the same innocent boy that you had met and whose painting you had made. I cry for my downfall in the last 20 years. I have fallen from heaven to hell, from God to devil." This is how the story of human beings is. That a good man, the most innocent, joyful shepherd, eventually became a murderer, and not just one murder, but 7 murders. What I am trying to help you all understand is that it all depends on what you are from within. And your birth chart is simply a mirror of what you are from within. Depending on whether your birth chart depicts godliness or devilishness, the retrograde Mercury will provide results. Enough for now. In my next video, I will talk more about retrograde Jupiter and retrograde Saturn. Love to you all, and remember to meditate every day. No matter how much is your bank balance, if you are not spending time turning inwards, if you are not spending time in knowing yourself, then you are no less than an animal, a two-legged animal who just enjoys in having food, sex and power. Ponder on my words. If you can relate with me, you are my friend, and if you cannot, then also you do not become my enemy, but your own worst enemy. Any person who refrains from focusing within is an enemy of himself. Meditate. Jai Sri Ganesha, Jai Guru. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha.